Hi, I'm Matt.
I'm Ben.
I'm a sound designer.
I'm an animator.
We're here to talk Star Wars.
100%. This is the show called The Holonet, and we are talking about Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope.
Incredible.
Yeah. When's the first time you watched A New Hope, Matt?
My earliest memories of watching watching Episode 4 would probably be from preschool.
Preschool.
Honestly. I have memories of my brother watching Episode 4 on VHS over and over and over and over. And honestly, at the time, I hated it.
Really?
It was something about VHS. I don't know. I remember waiting for him to rewind it and watch it all over again. Something about that interstitial period with the rewind bothered the hell out of me.
Huh.
However, I also remember waiting for years to get a stormtrooper costume for Halloween.
Absolutely.
I always wanted to be a stormtrooper. And it was because of those times. I didn't watch Episode 4 personally, like really true and dear to me, until middle school. Middle school, really. I played, I think I played Knights of the Old Republic.
Classic.
And that turned me on to Star Wars forever. And I think the movies were always something that I enjoyed, but they were never a passion of mine until after that.
So we've come to Star Wars in different paths, but we've arrived in the same place.
Yeah, how did you? What's your earliest memory of Star Wars?
Man, I think I was probably 5 or 6, and my dad, who saw Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope in '77, same as your dad.
Oh yeah.
It just defined a generation.
Yep.
He was a huge Star Wars fan, and he set me down like 5 or 6, and we watched A New Hope for the first time on VHS. Just, classic. And oh man, it just like changed my world. I was the kind of kid that wanted to watch the same movie over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Like most kids probably and that Star Wars A New Hope was that for me. And then luckily I had the fortune of the entire original trilogy was out. So we moved right into Episode 5 and then Episode 6, and I would just kind of binge those back to back to back from 6 to 9, and then the prequels came out. 1999, Episode 1, and then it was just like, there was a whole new era.
I remember when Episode 1 came out with my dad and my brother. I remember being in theaters at Regal.
Shout out to Regal Cinemas.
I remember I had my favorite hoodie, and I had to bunch up the hoodie and sit on my knees on top of the hoodie to see the screen.
Oh.
And I remember...
Short people problems.
Yep. I remember it being a huge event. And at that time, again, I didn't really know how special it was.
Yeah.
But I remember sitting on that hoodie and just being so excited to see everything that was happening. I remember that I don't have the starkest memories of it, but I remember the droidekas in the intro.
Yep.
And I remember Anakin in the Naboo starfighters at the end. Both of those were very exciting moments for me that I still have vivid memories of. Like Anakin kind of stealing the Naboo starfighters at that time.
Episode 1 was a game changer for me. But, Matthew, we are not here to talk the prequels. As much as we love them,
we are not.
We are in the minority maybe, but prequels are great. We are here to talk Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, which we watched before this recording on Disney+. We thought about watching it on these DVDs over here, which is I think the 25th anniversary Maybe later. I'm honestly not sure.
The purest form you can buy in stores at the moment.
Right. The VHS copies are lost to time, unfortunately. But we decided to watch it on Disney Plus because that's where everyone, that's gonna, that isn't into Star Wars already might already watch it. So
yes, we care about you, the viewer.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, we watched on Disney Plus, which does have some extra work they've done to the film, but the heart of the thing is still pure, and we're gonna talk about it.
Something about current canon.
Yeah,
is really it's important to talk about at the moment.
It is indeed. Oh, Matt. Okay, so we gushed. We talked about how much we love Star Wars and where we started with Star Wars. Quick recap. Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, was released in 1977. It is an American epic space opera written and directed by the one and only George Lucas. Just shout out to George Lucas.
Yep.
Starring Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, Alec Guinness, and Peter Mayhew, who was Chewbacca.
Yeah.
But aside from that, we're just gonna jump right into it. So, I mean, The movie opens with The Crawl, which is just genius.
Something referenced in so many pop culture icons. Comes to mind immediately Robot Chicken.
Yeah.
Family Guy.
100%. It's a great way to dump exposition on the audience without miring the film down in needless scenes of just dialogue. There's like a lot of films now, they're just full of exposition, but Star Wars just, aside from the opening crawl, which kind of gives you the lay of the land in terms of the story, it just throws you right into the mix. It doesn't let the audience catch up, which is kind of, if you're entering a new world, it's the best way to do it.
It's kind of like Zelda.
Yeah.
Like Zelda just pushes you into the place,
which is where you want to be.
Figure it out.
Exactly. I mean, I think as an audience member, you want the story to respect you and your own intelligence and your ability to kind of pick up on what's happening.
It's true adventure.
Exactly. And if you layer the story in all these scenes of who's who and what the stakes are and what's going on, then it kind of takes away, But Star Wars doesn't do that. It opens strong with that crawl, which, from a design perspective and a type perspective, is so interesting. That yellow on black, the black being the space with the stars, and that yellow type is such a bold design move. Yellow and black are like, very.
It's both a bold choice and bold type.
Ooh, good. I like the pun. Beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Out of the crawl though, we get probably and this is something that struck me when we rewatched it, because I kind of forgot the power of that first shot of the Star Destroyer coming above camera, right? You see the underbelly of this massive ship just poke through the top of the frame and just completely immerse yourself. And I think putting ourselves in the shoes of, let's say, our dads watching that in 1977, can you imagine what that must have felt like? Because there had been sci-fi done before Star Wars, but nothing like
very little in terms of what we imagine
there was
currently.
I think there might have been a little bit of Star Trek. I'm not exactly sure, but it was never done as like realistically and as like brutally as Star Wars was in a sense, right? Because that ship coming overhead was just powerful, like, oh my Lanta, and the score from John Williams that went along with it was just amazing. And interestingly enough, the perspective of that Star Destroyer crossing overhead kind of matched the perspective of the crawl, which was a cool little detail I picked up on. I'd never kind of noticed that watching it as a kid. Because for context,
a really good point.
I don't know when the last time you watched Star Wars Episode 4 was, but it's probably been at least 10 years for me. It's been a while.
I've gotta admit, I think a little bit of that childhood distaste for the original trilogy lives through with me personally. I know that's going to be an unpopular opinion. However, for me personally, I think the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy are the most watched for me.
I think the hardest thing about because going back and watching this after it had been so long, it was great. Just catching, like finding things you didn't, obviously you were kind of too young as a kid to notice. But I think the biggest thing was that Star Wars hadn't yet found its like lore and its scope.
Its
I think
voice.
like the episode 4 is incredible in terms of, what it was able to do in 1977 and the way it changed the whole landscape of movies and sci-fi, and what it did for, birthed Star Wars. But it was clear to me rewatching it, that they did such a good job expanding the scope of Star Wars after episode 4. It was much more limited. So I would say that that's the only thing that makes it hard to watch episode 4, maybe more so than 5 or 6, is because it was just it was a smaller scoped kind of a story. And then they took it and just blew it up.
I was really impressed as a person that had kind of, I thought I had, silly me, I thought I had grown past the original trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
I am the kind of person that doesn't replay old video games.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of person that doesn't, I don't relish in the antiquity of old media.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I love Knights of the Old Republic for everything that it has taught me about Star Wars. I love its story. I love its expanse. I love its lore.
But it's hard to go back
I don't
and
replay it anymore.
It's dated. I feel this. It's kind of a nice parallel to this film in that you always kind of revere it, but it's hard to go back and rewatch just because the age is there.
It's very true. However, I was incredibly impressed with
what I was about to say.
Things that I pulled out of this film. I didn't expect to love it as much as I do.
I agree. It holds up. And again, I think this is a testament to the quality of craftsmanship that was put into the film, which we'll talk about extensively in the sound and visual effects department.
Oh yeah.
But it holds up very, very well for being, because there are other films in the 70s that do not nearly hold up as well. And
this film was more, I didn't think about it in this way beforehand, but rewatching it with you, it was an artistic masterpiece. Cinematically, it was cinematography wise, it was wildly interesting. So many like concentric shots that were just.
You noticed that there was so many circles, like in the design and the art direction of Star Wars. There's so much roundness to it, which is kind of new for sci-fi. Sci-fi is very kind of angular and sharp and futuristic, but this really kind of like the aesthetic is totally unique to Star Wars. It invented its own look.
Previously put it in the same category as 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Right.
However, a lot of the cinematography was just as groundbreaking.
Absolutely.
It was art.
Yeah.
In its purest form.
Yeah,
it was
through.
Wild.
All right, Matt. Okay, so the opening shot, obviously beautiful. That Star Destroyer coming through. The quick fact, Star Destroyer and Leia's cruiser, which are both in that opening shot, both designed by Colin Cantrell, just one of the few people that contributed to Star Wars. Got a shout out to all of the artists that put work into this film. A little detail that I noticed from a visual effects standpoint is when the Star Destroyer crosses over Leia's cruiser, it casts a shadow on it, which, metaphor-wise, there's obviously a lot in there. It's the Empire. It's this big dominating force in the galaxy. It casts a shadow over everything in the galaxy. But from a technical standpoint, that was probably complicated to do because, I mean, those were real models, like that were lit, and that kind of that detail of the shadow being cast probably would have been overlooked if it was made by people that didn't have as much kind of respect for the craft.
Even to this day, I mean, if you were to see that in animation, They might not have even thought about that.
Absolutely. And we'll get into, more people that contributed to the film, but in that shot, you get an instance of motion control photography, which was pioneered by the artists at Industrial Light and Magic, created by George Lucas for this film. Apparently, the special effects studio at 20th Century Fox had been disbanded. So George was like, I'll do it myself. He made this team and called it ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, and they did all the work on this, and they used motion control photography, which is essentially, because it's all film, right? I mean, it's what you get in camera. It's what you get in camera. There's no you can do small things like, painting lightsaber blades over the exposed film, but anything else,
still intensive.
Absolutely, that's intense rotoscoping, which we'll get into too. But the motion control allowed these artists to take several passes with the same camera movement, precisely of the same shot, right? So if it's Leia's ship was one pass, the Star Destroyer was another, background was another, and then they got to composite it all together. So really interesting technology.
Absolutely.
And then Leia's ship pulled in by the Star Destroyer, and we get our first glimpse of things in the Star Wars universe. People, we get stormtroopers, we get R2 and C-3PO running around, being adorable. Mm-hmm. R2's sound design, just awesome. So
Which
good.
Is both some of the first digital sounds in films, some of the first computer-generated sounds, as well as Ben Burtt, who we haven't talked about as of yet, the father of modern sound design. He was a somewhat of an intern with Lucasfilm at this point, which Lucasfilm had not come to exist. However,
he was new. He was green.
He was new. He was green, but he was somebody that had idolized sound in Hollywood films, such as Jack Foley and pioneers before him. And Ben Burtt actually recorded most of these sounds in these films himself.
Yeah, which is incredible. The way that he
for
was
modern day, the sound designer of a film, the reproduction mixer, the re-recording mixers, Foley artists, etc., they don't record these sounds themselves. Foley artists perform the sounds. Foley mixers record the sounds. Nobody does all these things themselves.
But he did it. He did it all.
He took an entire year to record all the sounds of this film.
That's just incredible.
And
you mentioned before we started talking that even my dad kind of noted this, that a lot of the sounds you're hearing in this movie were the first time that anyone in the late 70s had heard sounds like this on film, whether it's the blaster, the lightsaber. Like, it was such an engaging experience.
Absolutely.
Because people were like, they'd never heard this before.
And this is a person that Ben Burtt isn't, he's not a rich man. He's not a household name. However, he's changed the world. He's changed culture. He's changed media forever. And he's somebody that's to be respected. He still works. He's still doing sound design.
Is he at
Skywalker Sound?
Skywalker Sound, right.
Yeah. Something else you might have heard of him is WALL-E.
Really? He did WALL-E?
He did WALL-E.
Which honestly,
that was one of the last things that he was the principal sound designer.
It makes sense because WALL-E had amazing sound design. I mean, when I think about WALL-E, one of the things I remember is the sound of WALL-E, and that can't be said for a lot of films. But like, if you picture R2-D2, you hear R2-D2.
R2-D2. He mixed that with computer generated sounds and his own voice.
Oh man. So we're in the Star Destroyer. Leia's ship has been pulled up. We get to see stormtroopers for the first time. And interestingly enough, when we all kind of think of stormtroopers at this point,
as they are.
Yeah. We kind of think of them as a little bumbling and a little kind of like not scary in the way that Star Wars has has used them, and
Has
especially in
trended over the
episodes.
years.
Right, but in this,
They're
when they
pretty
open up,
terrifying
they're
at the moment.
terrifying. The menace is real, and it's an emotion that I remember feeling as a kid watching episode 4 and haven't really felt since. But when they
Over
show
the
up, I'm
years-
like, they annihilate
Over the
those
years,
rebels,
they've gained a
man.
reputation for being flaccid,
That's a good word to describe.
bumbling.
Yeah, they've got poor aim.
Poor aim, but in this first scene, they kill quite a few people.
They annihilate those rebels, and I was like, oh damn, these stormtroopers, they're coming in hot. And then of course, Darth Vader walks through that door, which as a kid, you're just like a testament to such genius character design in both stormtroopers and Darth Vader, which was done by the incredible Ralph McQuarrie, the concept artist for this film. The kind of, I'd say, the visual equal to Ben Burtt. I think both of these guys contributed so much to Star Wars and aren't household names. Both kind of, famous within their respective communities. But Ralph McQuarrie did the concept paintings for essentially all of this first film. Like George's ideas were abstract; they hadn't been done before, and so he tapped this guy to make these paintings to put George's ideas onto paper, and he used those paintings in the pitch meeting to 20th Century Fox. And apparently it's what helped contribute to them greenlighting the film, was because they kind of saw these early visualizations of what George was wanting to do through Ralph McQuarrie's paintings.
So when you look at these paintings online of Luke Skywalker as like Luke Starkiller, etc., etc., are those him?
Yes,
are those his paintings?
A lot of those are his
paintings.
He wasn't exclusive. I mean, there are other matte painting artists that worked on the film, but mostly for like background plates and such. He was like the guy that was kind of the creative force behind the visuals of what stuff looked like. So a lot of his paintings have become kind of iconic in a small sense now, and one of those is this painting of a stormtrooper in a kind of random imperialish looking headquarters, and the stormtrooper's holding a lightsaber, which is interesting. So this is all in a time where the rules haven't really been set yet, right? It wasn't iron cut that only Jedi and Sith had lightsabers. He was like, the idea of the lightsaber was there, and he was like, a stormtrooper should have that, right? And it's like, oh no.
To 2019 or whenever episode 9 first came out, and you've got Finn holding a lightsaber.
That's true. Who is a stormtrooper?
Holding his own.
You know what? I've never made that connection. I wonder if in any sense that was a nod to that original painting, which surprisingly enough, there have been a lot. They tend to go back and draw on his original concepts for even future characters. There's a painting of the group back when it was Luke Starkiller, and they hadn't really figured out the character designs. And Han Solo was this big green alien. He wasn't a guy. He wasn't like a human smuggler. And that character design that Ralph did for Han Solo ended up being the design for Zeb Orleus. That's not the right name. He's the character in Star Wars Rebels, the animated series that's in that group. You might not have seen that series yet, but it's great.
Wow.
So they used that original Han Solo.
I have not seen yet.
Yeah, it's great, and it's fun to see. It's cool that they go back and tap his original ideas for characters that didn't end up making it, on the screen originally.
It's just fantastic the way that Star Wars, under Disney's direction, although I cannot say that it wouldn't have happened without Disney's direction,
right?
How much Star Wars in recent years has tapped the old times and has tapped the lore.
I mean, there's so much creativity there. They'd be missing out if they didn't,
It's incredible. It's incredible.
So we go straight from Leia's ship. 3PO and R2 are jettisoned in an escape pod down to Tatooine, the favorite Star Wars planet, the Star Wars planet that's been used over and over and over again.
Favorite
but we love
binary
Tatooine.
Star.
Yeah, absolutely.
Planet.
So what struck me about rewatching this film is they did a really great job showing the scale and emptiness of Tatooine. Like those wide shots were really great. And then there's that skeleton that they added, that big. Were they trying to make that like a crate dragon that we've seen in The Mandalorian season 2?
You
Is that
know,
what that's supposed to be?
I think I don't think that's what they were trying to do,
Right.
but I think
But maybe
that's
they
what
turned it into
people
yes.
afterwards tried to make
I
it
think that
into.
is a common theme in Star Wars, is that there were a lot of just kind of random things in this film that the community who ended up working on, Star Wars fans themselves, who ended up being Star Wars creative professionals, took those nuggets and expanded it into things that fill out the lore of Star Wars, which is cool,
Absolutely. I mean, a crate
yeah.
dragon in Knights of the Old Republic, I relished in fighting a crate dragon.
Yeah.
That was
you got to do that
one
in
of
that
the
game?
primary
Yeah.
first off-world experiences in that game is fighting a crate dragon, and it's just wildly interesting. You get to explore its den.
Huh, that's cool. Does any of it line up to what they did with the crate dragon in The Mandalorian by chance? In terms of the design of the dragon or anything like that, or did they depart?
They depart.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah. And that's,
that's something they're still reconciling is the intensely popular world of Knights of the Old Republic with
the modern
current
canon. Yes, there's the conversation about canon in Star Wars is vast, and we will, I'm sure, do an episode on that in the future.
Yes, absolutely.
So a little production behind the scenes. They shot all the Tatooine sequences in the Tunisian desert. There was a Tunisian sandstorm, and it just wrecked production, right? I mean, imagine a sandstorm on, at the time, I mean, even more kind of finicky film gear than what we have today, right? Like, imagine fine particles of sand just ruined. So it was a mess on their shoot.
Did you unearth in your research that there is actually a town called Tatooine?
Is there? Does it have the old props and stuff?
There actually is a town called Tatooine. It's spelled differently. However, I don't know if the props are still there, but they named the town after where they filmed.
I feel like
it is called Tatooine.
Could be wrong on this. I feel like I've seen some of those huts. Maybe it's Luke's family's, moisture farm or something else, still standing. But I imagine they kind of like the Hobbit village in New Zealand. It's kind of cool to see something
very similar.
Just so essentially that production was just kind of just fucked in the Tunisian desert. Apparently, Anthony Daniels, who plays 3PO, his costume broke when he was shooting, and it was like this hard plastic stuff, right? And one foot piece like broke and stabbed him.
Fucking
and
nightmare.
that shut down production. It just a whole mess. So droids 3PO R2 captured by Jawas. Yep. Love Jawas again from a sound design perspective. So interesting, Yeah. Oh, when I was a kid, I hated the Jawas. I was like, these fucking things, get them out of here. Yeah. But we are introduced to Luke Skywalker on his aunt and uncle's moisture farm in the middle of the desert in Tatooine. And again, one of those takeaways from me watching this was how committed Mark Hamill was to this performance. I feel like out of most of the actors, he kind of had the most heart in his role. He like kind of believed in the world the most and gave it so much love.
Absolutely. He's a person that to this day shows so much heart in everything he plays. He plays the Joker.
Oh, and the Batman the Animated Series is just a classic. What an actor to have two just such iconic roles under their belt in their careers. Just wild.
Just a true method actor. Not method actor.
Not in the methody method sense, but like a character actor.
A true thespian.
Thespian. Yeah, absolutely. The Joker is iconic. His role as Luke. Some people kind of, the acting in the 70s is a bit of a different breed, but I feel like he really commits, and you can just see his dedication. Like,
you can see him on stage with Alec Guinness.
100%.
You really can.
Absolutely.
I mean, you literally can, but also you can see him on stage with Alec Guinness.
And the iconic kind of Luke shot from that whole sequence on Uncle Owen and Aunt Prue's moisture farm is him standing on the hill looking out at the twin suns. And then John Williams' Luke theme crescendos and oh man. So even if a movie's
started on John Williams.
I know. Well, we're gonna talk John Williams because that man just composed the hell out of this film. Yep. I feel like it is really the work of a lot of these artists that keep the film on such a high standing today. Like the score and the matte paintings and the original inspiration from Ralph McQuarrie. Like these artists like kind of made Star Wars. In addition to George Lucas's vision, like I feel like they're a large reason as to why this still holds up as much as it does.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of John Williams, I feel like we should talk about this as early as possible. There is a lot of talk that John Williams might have stolen somewhat, kind of.
Like any
some
themes?
melody lines from Gustav Holst's The Planets.
Huh, I didn't know this.
This is a orchestral piece that is very sci-fi in theming and at least 50, 60 years ahead of time of Star Wars. There are some very common themes and melodies that are shared between the two. However, you can't completely contrast them. John Williams may have taken some thematic elements from Gustav Holst, and that's to be expected.
Is it taken or is it inspiration? You know,
that's to be expected. Almost. I mean, any artist these days will tell you that there's nothing you can do that's completely original.
As a working designer and animator, and you as a working sound designer, inspiration's critical. It's hard to start with a purely blank canvas and just let it come to you. I mean, you kind of need to look at reference and see what's out there and come up with something unique based off of that.
It is a testament to the originality of Star Wars that you can only compare it to one thing.
Absolutely, I think that's a great way of putting it. Absolutely,
it's fantastic that if you listen to Gustav Holst's Planets to this day, which I recommend you absolutely do, it's fantastic. It is much less exciting than John Williams' score.
Yeah,
it's incredible. However, you will be remiss to find something as wondrous and adventurous as John Williams' score
in Star Wars. Yes. I mean, it's a classic for a reason. So back to the plot of this film. R2 and C3, R2 runs away, right? They're purchased by Uncle Owen, which good on Uncle Owen for purchasing these two droids. Yeah. I mean,
he didn't want to.
But I mean, hey, it worked out for the future of the galaxy. So thanks, Uncle Owen.
Yep.
R2 runs away because he's trying to get to Obi-Wan because he's got this message from Princess Leia, and he's like, I gotta find Obi-Wan. He runs away. Luke and 3PO go after him in this shot right here, which is on this great poster. And then we meet Obi-Wan for the first time after Luke is ambushed by Tusken Raiders. And we get a really interesting Force ability that hasn't really been used since this film, which is this Force scream that he uses.
In sound design, I need to research this a lot more. The Force scream.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Wow.
And I think what they were doing, if I had to guess, is that my kind of takeaway was that they were leaning into the old ancient wizard element of Obi-Wan pretty hard. I think, and they had not really found the whole Jedi Knight aspect yet. You know what I mean? And honestly, there are theories about, I think a lot of this can be chalked up to the fact that it just hadn't been figured out yet by George Lucas. But obviously, Obi-Wan in this film does not resemble too much of what Obi-Wan was like in the prequel films.
Yeah.
And we'll see, the Obi-Wan show is coming out, and that's going to bridge the gap.
And his magnificence had not been born yet.
Exactly.
Well, he might have been born.
There are some theories that, maybe Obi-Wan has a little bit of dementia because he doesn't remember things that he just should remember. But honestly, it all just boils down to the fact that this was done before those, it's, what happens when you start a story in the middle and then you end up going back 20 years later to do the beginning. There's bound to be inconsistencies.
It's ballsy.
So it is. It's a great move. And honestly, I think it adds to that kind of being thrust into the middle of this conflict as an audience member that you don't know anything about is a lot more interesting than, if you had started Star Wars perhaps at episode 1. Still good, of course, still great, but I think starting at episode 4 is a more enjoyable
it's an enjoyable experience, and it gives credence to it lends legitimacy to the rest of Star Wars as we know it.
Exactly, and I think that's why it's so important.
Everything, boop, 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 into place.
Yeah.
Everything just falls into place.
It is the inspiration for all of Star Wars, so, I mean, you got to start with it, of course. So, Luke and Obi-Wan go back to Obi-Wan's hut, and we get this great monologue from Alec Guinness about Luke's father, the significance of, the Clone Wars, the Jedi, and the Force. We see for the first time the lightsaber, which is just like, man, from a concept,
what a weapon,
visual design and sound design perspectives, so genius. Like Ben Burtt, apparently it was the first thing he recorded for the film, and know this. It was was it a wand? Was it a?
It was wildly different than every other sound effect we recorded. It was the reverse. It was a something emitting sound in front of a microphone.
Right.
He would
just move it. Yeah. Get that really interesting feedback. Imagine being Ben Burtt.
Completely different than
anything
else beforehand.
Because normally as a sound designer, you probably don't want much humming, and this is all humming. This is like,
it's reverse. Of the way you would normally record anything.
That's just genius.
Even the blasters from the stormtroopers were him recording, hitting radio lines,
like telephone lines.
Telephone lines. Yeah, you smack them with a stick and. Pew,
interesting.
Pew.
That's genius.
Everything that we would record afterwards and think is like, oh yeah. I mean, even you remember in the 90s Galaxy Quest, Star Trek would be pew pew pew.
Yeah.
Pew 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 is all Ben Burtt.
Absolutely. And like the power of those blasters, you really heard them. They felt scary, right? Same with the lightsaber. Like that humming really lended itself to the danger of this weapon, because it's the most powerful weapon.
You believe this
in
is
the
thing that burned right through you?
Yeah,
it was just
absolutely. You didn't want to touch that shit.
Yep.
So the weapon, to quote Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's the weapon of a Jedi Knight.
Yeah.
An elegant weapon. For a more civilized age, which kind of perfectly sums up what it is, because the inspiration was all the adventure films that George Lucas loved, and he wanted these Jedi Knights to be more defenders than offensive, right? A blaster is very offensive. You're shooting something, but a sword is defensive, right? You kind of use it to protect yourself.
A gun is an ugly weapon that can be used by anybody to kill anybody.
However, but a lightsaber has to be welled by someone who knows how to use it.
A fencing.
Exactly.
It's swordsmanship. It's something that is a real knight.
Heavily inspired by those adventure films, and he wanted to have swords in this film, but you can't just have a sword in a space opera, right? No. So it has to be futuristic, and it's like, what if the blade was made of light, and it could cut through anything, and it's like, damn, that's genius. Yep. Literally, like whenever that idea came to him, maybe he was on the John, maybe he was taking a shower, but I'm sure he ran to his notebook and was like, "Oh my God, this is the greatest idea ever."
Shaving his signature mutton chops.
That's right. So visually, sound design wise, we talked about how the sound of the lightsaber came to be. Visually, the hilt was a little camera flash extension for a 4x3 camera that they just kit bashed. They took the flash part off and just used that metal cylinder, added a few random odds and ends to it. If you go back and see pictures of that original lightsaber hilt, it looked kind of rough. They hadn't really fine-tuned it, but it worked.
Even if you watch Obi-Wan
in
episode 4, him preparing to fight Vader. He has this big clunky thing in his hands.
It was, and honestly, that kind of leans into originally when they thought about it, George wanted the lightsaber to, his direction for the actors was that it should feel really heavy. Like imagine picking up like a 50-pound claymore. And that's why they held it with two hands, because you had to hold it with two hands. And they kind of eventually came off that. In episode 5, the combat was a little bit more fluid, the lightsaber fights. Episode 6, much more. And then, of course, the prequels, which is kind of the defining lightsaber combat, in my opinion.
Yes.
They're obviously Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon can use it with one hand. But originally, it was designed to be this very heavy object that like you had to use two hands to wield, which kind of informed the lightsaber form of that film.
Which I believe had the same stunt director as The Princess Bride.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean,
he had the same
that's great.
same swordsmanship instructor as Princess Bride.
That's awesome. Which I mean makes sense because that movie was the kind of action film. That's amazing. So we talked about the hilt. The blade was essentially just a rotating cylinder with this retroreflective film screen material on it that bounced light back into the camera because they thought that was going to be the effect, right? Like the blade would glow in the film that they shot. Only until they looked at it were they like, damn, this doesn't quite work. Not only was there no color to it, but depending on the angle of the blade, the light would not reflect back into the camera lens. So you would have this glowing blade, and then Luke would drop the lightsaber, and then it would stop glowing. And it'd be like, well, that doesn't work. So they had to rotoscope those blades onto the film. Luckily, there's not a lot of lightsaber in episode 4, so...
Will you explain what that means?
Rotoscoping? Absolutely.
Yes.
So rotoscoping is the worst. Rotoscoping is frame by frame painting in or cutting out an object, right? So in the case of the lightsaber, luckily they had an actual blade captured in film to work with, but frame by frame, 24 frames in a second of film, an artist had to paint on that lightsaber blade every single frame and make it match the original, right? Because if you rotoscope something wrong, the audience will immediately see it, because if that blade didn't line up, it's going to look really wonky. And you can always tell when something's been rotoscoped in old films because there's just a little bit of jitter. And that jitter comes from that, every frame an artist is painting it on there. And they're going to do their absolute best, but it's usually not 100%. And if it's not 100%, you kind of see that object wiggle around.
Painted will ever be.
Right. So rotoscoping is the worst. Now we can digitally rotoscope. Still a kind of a painful process because you're still going frame by frame. But there's some, in all these programs, there are ways to do it. Now there's a plug-in in After Effects where you could just make a lightsaber blade, and you can it attaches automatically to whatever you want it to, and it's sinfully easy compared to what these people must have gone through making these lightsaber blades.
I should mention, may not be the best time. However, I should mention that THX.
Yes.
Something you may have seen in movies from your childhood to now.
Of course, the big WOM intro, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Lucasfilm, surround sound as you know it wouldn't exist without Star Wars.
The THX?
Star Wars, when George Lucas and Ben Burtt created Star Wars, they knew that they had something new in sound. And they created a standard to judge theaters. Have you ever heard of this, Ben? They created a standard where when Star Wars was played, it had to be played in a THX certified theater. So to create the new sounds that you heard in this series, they wanted to make sure that you went to a theater
where you could experience that sound.
Where you could experience this sound in the reality
in its fullest.
Intended.
Yeah, absolutely.
So George Lucas and Ben Burtt and the people that they hired for this purpose went around the country, and they certified theaters
Huh.
that had the audio capabilities to show this film. So when you heard that THX sound,
Yeah.
you heard it in a theater that was able to show you this. This was the first time that you were actually able to hear these sounds. This was the first time that you were able to actually go to a theater and know that you were hearing
the sound as
the designers intended.
Mm-hmm. Does it pain you at all as a sound designer to know that a lot of the work you do might be listened to on little headphones, like in-ear headphones, as opposed to kind of surround sound or over-ear headphones? Because it's like making a video and knowing that someone might or a film and knowing someone might watch it on their phone. It's like, oh, God.
It in one hand it does,
Yeah,
and in the other hand it doesn't. Because if I'm doing my job right,
it's still gonna sound good in those headphones.
It's still gonna sound okay.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point.
However,
I think that's fair.
However, I think of a sound designer or a visual designer as much as any craftsman and the right tools for their job. I think if either of us are doing their job, you should be able to see your work on a CRT television from the old days just as well as you can on a modern 4K monitor.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
But with that said, this was really the first time that theaters were standardized. In the old days, when these movies came out, it was not at all uncommon for you to be able to hear. I'm going to use this purely as speculation.
Okay.
These movies were not out at the same time, but like if you were watching Star Wars, you could in the next theater over was playing Jurassic Park.
Oh, could you be able to hear Jurassic Park?
Yeah, the T-Rex.
Wouldn't that be so distracting? Yeah.
Right next door.
Gosh. Hey, we're lucky.
THX certification meant that you couldn't hear that.
That's right, and that would disrupt the whole experience.
At the same time, however, that's the kind of difference we're talking about.
We do live in a great age of cinema where we don't have to deal with stuff like that. So that'd be pretty annoying.
We don't.
All right. So Obi-Wan and Luke, they bonded. He picked up his lightsaber. He swung it around. Owen and Aunt Peru, unfortunately, are murdered by the Empire. Aunt Peru. Baru? Is it
Baru?
Is it Baru?
It's Baru.
I thought it was Peru.
Not Peru.
Oh man, we're gonna have to double check this later. I'm gonna stand in the Peru camp, and you're gonna stand in the Baru camp, and we'll see who's right. I'm inclined to believe you. So they're murdered. Kind of horrifically, I might add. I'm surprised it didn't affect me more as a kid, but you could kind of see the charred skeletons laying out, and I was like,
quite
damn. I'm like, okay, stormtroopers. And you get this great line from Obi-Wan about how it couldn't have been done by sand people because the accuracy of the kind of blaster fire was only achievable by Imperial stormtroopers who proved themselves to be maybe not so accurate in later films, but that's okay. Again, they were imposing in this movie. They were menacing. I didn't want to mess with a stormtrooper. Okay, so that kind of thrusts the plot forward, and our Obi-Wan, 3PO, R2, and Luke head to Mos Eisley.
Yes.
The best place in Tatooine. And they go to a really amazing cantina with a whole mix of characters that, from a visual design perspective and a costume design perspective, neither of us are in that whole mix of characters. We don't know anything about costume work or anything, but man, the design of these characters is so great. Absolutely. And the special effects hold up so well.
Yeah.
We get the great Cantina band doing their thing in there. And we get to meet Han Solo, who, for the record, does shoot first. But, Disney and Lucasfilm later decide, I think this is pre-Disney, but they decided that he's a good guy. He probably shouldn't shoot first, even if he's thinking that, his life might be at stake. So they kind of edit the film to move his head out of the way and have Greedo shoot first. The classic kind of debate among Star Wars fans. But Han Solo does shoot first.
Yeah.
historically speaking.
Smuggler.
He's a smuggler.
Scoundrel.
He's allowed to be. He's an anti-hero. He's not Luke Skywalker, right? He's not pure. He ends up doing the right thing at the end of the film, but
absolutely.
But he's in it for the money, right? He's a smuggler, you know?
Yeah.
He's not a typical hero. So I think that it's okay that he shoots first. And if I had my druthers, I think they shouldn't have edited it, but we watched it. We watched the Disney Plus version.
I agree. If
anything, he breaks his neck dodging that bullet.
How much of a character development he has by the end.
Yeah. We also meet Chewie, adorable,
absolutely,
played by Peter Mayhew, who's unfortunately passed, but such a great design and surprisingly convincing for a man in a giant fursuit. I don't see a man in a fursuit. I see Chewbacca. You know, it's impressive costume work. Man, okay, so after that we get the Millennium Falcon for the first time, which is amazing. What a ship design!
What a name.
Oh man, what a name! Absolutely. Whoever was like, what should we call this ship? Damn, what about the Millennium Falcon? I was like, that guy deserves a raise because what a fucking name!
Absolutely.
Oh my Lanta. I think what sets Star Wars ships apart, and I remember seeing this in an YouTube video with Adam Savage. He talks about the difference between Star Wars ships and Star Trek ships from a modeling perspective and a design perspective.
Yeah.
Star Trek ships, very kind of clean futuristic, right? Idealistic future. So the ships are smooth, right?
Yeah.
Very chrome, very reflective. Star Wars is a dystopian future, right? It's hard to even call it a future. The technology is futuristic, but individuals don't have it any better off than...
It's a futuristic past.
Right,
it's a long
exactly.
time ago.
There's a fantasy element to it, and from a ship design perspective, they have all of these just little nubbins, right? These ships are covered in exposed parts and linings and pipes and all this stuff that gives the surface of the ship, some of which we've got up here, so much texture, right? Because
absolutely.
With these little models that my dad and I built together, when you paint in some weathering, all of that gets caught in the crevices, right? If you try to weather a Star Trek ship, it's not gonna...
We built these together?
We built those together, yeah. That just not too long ago, just a couple of years ago, we built these two, and we've got them more ready to build. It's a good hub, yeah.
Mr. Richard is the best person on the planet.
He's a great dad, the best dad. Love him to death. But yeah, the ships they hold so much detail because of all that texture on the surface.
Yeah.
And even the Millennium Falcon has these, around the exhaust and everything, has these like burnt spots, right? It's like a ship that's been used. It is a worn ship. It's weathered. It's been across the galaxy probably 100 times. And then we get the inside of the Millennium Falcon. We're on our way to Alderaan, and little did they know, Alderaan's gone. Unfortunately, Tarkin, Darth Vader, and company blew it up via the Death Star after Princess Leia would not give up the location of the rebels. And from a visual design perspective, the Death Star is just awesome. Like a planet that can shoot a laser beam out of the center of it.
It's wildly recognizable.
Oh, yeah. The kind of icons that this film birthed, just in terms of ships, objects, and the rest, are like incredible. The list is very long, and the Death Star is absolutely one of them. I've got a Death Star ice cube tray upstairs, and I use it all the time, and it's excellent. It's excellent.
Absolutely.
Alderaan, destroyed. R.I.P. Alderaan. Kind of intense to kill billions of people casually on the Empire's part, but they don't mess around.
No.
They go hard. So we've got Han Solo, Obi-Wan, Luke, 3PO and R2 and Chewie all headed towards Alderaan. They get there, it's in pieces. Yikes, big yikes. And then the Death Star's there. They fly towards it thinking it's a moon, and we get the classic, that's no moon, because it's a battle station.
Mm-hmm.
Big-ass battle station. And they get pulled in. Millennium Falcon gets sucked right in to the battle station. Then we get a great kind of middle act of this film that all takes place on the Death Star. We get the classic trash compactor scene. which was maybe a bit more drawn out than I remember last time.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's drawn out, and it's quite the conflict of the film.
Yeah,
honestly,
they're all about to get crushed by this trash compactor.
They're all about to get crushed by this, and it's the droids, the
R2
unsung heroes.
Yeah, really, kind of saving the day. Otherwise, we would movie roll credits, written and directed by George Lucas after they get squished by the trash compactor. That's it. We get a lot of great scenes. This is our first time seeing the inside of any kind of Imperial base, and the whole visual design language there is really interesting. A lot of that kind of pill shaped all over the place, and all of their wall decor and all the lighting.
Shout out to Ben Maxey and our intro design for this.
Yeah, I'm gonna take some motifs from that more than likely. It's a classic kind of Star Wars visual motif at this point, used all over the place.
Used from Clone Wars to accentuate the change from Republic design into Imperial.
Absolutely. And I remember noticing that, I think maybe in episode 2, Attack of the Clones, but definitely in episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I was like, oh, you can tell what's happening. Of course, you know what's going to happen because all these Republic ships are starting to adopt the traits of Imperial ships, and then of course they get, that's what they end up being. But yeah, this Death Star sequence is great. We get a lot of interesting character moments between Han and Luke and Leia. The bond starts to form there. We get Luke barging in on Leia, rescuing her, and we get, aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? Which, listen, as a man with the stature of 5'8", I could take slight offense to, because I'm not too short to be a stormtrooper, right, Matt?
Certainly not. Certainly not.
There we go. We also get, backtracking just a touch, we get light speed when the Millennium Falcon is headed to Alderaan, which is such an interesting idea. I don't know if light speed had been used before in any kind of sci-fi element, but the idea of a ship moving at light speed and the way that was visually designed was really cool. So the classic kind of motif is the stars stretching out with that kind of same perspective, and then the ship jumps. Apparently, via a 1978 interview with John Dykstra in the Fantasy Film Journal, was done manually by just keeping the exposure of the film open and moving the stars so that they looked like they were streaking. Wow. Super simple, super genius.
Very simple. I was going to ask how they did that.
Yeah.
But that's much more simple than I thought.
Right. I expected it would be a process compared to everything else they had to deal with in the film, but it's not. Another big thing about this whole sequence was those matte paintings. Just all the big exterior shots of the Death Star, of the inside of the Death Star, just hold up so well because they're just big ass paintings. That's what helps the kind of film maintain its kind of visual relevancy, is that it doesn't look bad. It looks awesome.
Just practical effects.
Practical effects, man, all the way. But yeah, they eventually escape the Death Star. Obi-Wan and Vader have their fight, which, in retrospect, is probably the worst lightsaber fight in the series. But, it's Alec Guinness. He's a little bit older.
Unfortunately.
They hadn't figured it out quite yet, but still quite good. We got to see a red lightsaber for the first time.
The most realistic sword fight.
You know what?
Series.
That's a great way of putting it. It is the most realistic sword, because if you and I were to get two lightsabers, that's exactly how it would go. We'd be like, whack, whack. Yeah, it was a little clumsy, a little awkward.
And it wasn't that exciting.
It wasn't that exciting. Yeah, I feel like obviously everything's done in an exaggerated fashion for the purpose of a movie, but especially the kind of prequel lightsaber fights, which people like to dunk on a little bit. I personally think they're great, but this one is arguably the most realistic, because that's what would happen. If two people had, imagine holding a lightsaber, you'd be nervous. I'm like, I'm not swinging. I'm gonna cut my own leg off.
Just testing each other.
Absolutely. Obi-Wan cut in half, self-sacrifice to allow
He seems
Luke
pretty
and company
stoked
to
about
escape.
it, though. He's pretty smug.
I think he
at the
accepted
moment.
it. I think that he had lived as a hermit on Tatooine for long enough and was like, "This is." I think he's a Jedi, right? I'm sure he knew that was what he was meant to do.
He was certainly ready.
Yeah, I felt like that way. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was ready to go. And then Luke and company retreat to Yavin. And we get this really great sequence where we get to see the rebellion in full force. So the whole bay of X-Wings and Y-Wings and maybe A-Wings. Were there A-Wings in there? I think it was just Y-Wings and X-Wings.
I think it was X and Y Wings.
Yeah. Which, shout out to all the amazing ship designs. For some reason, all based off of letters in our alphabet. But all right, I'll take it. We get TIE fighters and then we get X-Wings because they look like an X, and Y-Wings because they kind of look like a Y. And then A-Wings because it's a regular ship and we've named all of our ships X, Y, whatever. We got to continue this thing. So fuck it. It looks like an A. We'll go with A-Wing. They had, like some shots in this film, replaced a couple of those fighter shots with CG shots. They must have done in I think like the mid 90s. So
yeah,
I wish we could kind of go back and see them as they are originally done and see the work of those motion control rigs and all of that compositing of different exposures of film. But unfortunately, it is what it is.
Lost to the ages. Lost to our wallets.
If you've got a VHS player somehow, some way, and those original copies, you can probably go back and see it. But we do not. So we watched this new version, but they still looked great. Absolutely. It still looked good.
Yeah.
The story was still conveyed. And then, kind of moving through the plot here, you get probably the memorable sequence for most people from this movie, which is the trench run. Which, just so. My dad is a big fighter pilot guy, big World War II buff.
Yeah.
And a lot of
people talk about George Lucas being one of his first movies was American Graffiti.
Yes.
If not his first movie.
I think his first full-length film.
And people talk about his love for cars and speed and
50s era.
And these shots were real testaments
they were
to that.
Very kinetic. Really, really good. Like, I think that, if you go back and watch sci-fi films before this, I'm sure the space sequences were pretty boring. If there were any, I honestly don't know. But the kineticness of this trench run was amazing, right? You really felt the speed of X-Wings flying through that trench, getting shot down by TIE fighters. So many shot down X-Wings.
Absolutely.
Man, Rebellion, just step it up, guys. Empire's just wiping the floor with you. But luckily they had Luke, who force-powered that shit, and with no AI computer required, shot that missile right into the Death Star. Yeah, use the Force, Luke. Which is just, Obi-Wan quickly kind of assumed that Force Ghost role and was like, hey, I'm going to be in your ear for the rest of your life. Just hanging out, giving you advice.
Slightly underappreciated at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's quite, it's quite an experience. Imagine having Obi-Wan in your ear for the rest of your life, being like, don't do that. Don't do it. Bad idea. All right, that's fine. You can do that. Yeah, I'd take that. But yeah, Luke nails it, like shooting womp rats on Tatooine, just right in that hole, and Death Star explodes. Really a beautiful explosion shot.
Vader spins off into space.
Right, poor Vader. Han Solo, which, hey, shout out to Han Solo for shooting down Anakin Skywalker, the best fighter pilot in the galaxy. Han Solo says, nah, and just clips him, and he's off.
What a rebel.
What a rebel. Yeah, soon to join the cause. That was him joining the cause. Good character moment for Han Solo. His redemption, he might have shot Greedo. He definitely shot Greedo. But he also saved the day and shot Darth Vader. So that kind of equals it out.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, Luke blows up the Death Star. The Death Star explosion is a great, again, the testament to practical effects over
beautiful
bad visual effects, anything computer generated, which of course was not a thing at the time. But that explosion looked amazing. They blew up probably a quarter scale. I'm not a quarter scale to the Death Star, but probably a model the size of a car or something. And the scale's right. You can see it. All the particles that come off look amazing.
Yeah.
And then we get that little closing ceremony scene that always gave me goosebumps as a kid. And they get their Olympic medals.
The jackets.
Yeah. Oh, the jackets. The jacket game. The fashion in Star Wars is also...
it's so great.
Sorry, just take 2 minutes and talk about the fashion, because it never feels like they're wearing human clothes, like any clothes that would have been around.
Not modern day.
No, but even like of the 70s. I'd say
the pleated leather that feels like they are wearing the seat of a 70s Camaro.
It's perfect.
Incredible.
I'd say the only fashion thing that dates this film is definitely the 70s hair and sideburns. There are some Imperial officers that is like, oof. If you watch this film outside of context and someone was kind of shirred up on what fashion was what in what era, most people kind of have an idea. You could look at that and be like, that was done in the 70s because that hair is just ridiculous. But the fashion was on point in that closing sequence.
Absolutely.
And then roll credits, man. Fucking written and directed by George Lucas.
Yeah.
Which we've talked about Ben Burtt, we've talked about Ralph McQuarrie. We haven't talked about George Lucas much. Which, he's the man. He's responsible for it all.
He's the man.
Yeah. Now he's
love him or hate him, he's the man.
Yeah, I think you could argue, his ability as a kind of a writer and a director. He's a good director and he's a good writer. Some people don't like his dialogue choices and stuff like that. He gets criticism for the prequels.
I think he's a good writer. He's a good director. He's a great progenitor.
Yeah.
I think he creates worlds that other writers and directors
could not.
Can just have their way with, and it's so beautiful.
You could have a great dialogue writer who could not be nearly as kind of world-building or imaginative as George Lucas, right? And that really that's a whole skill in and of itself, because so few people really do that.
Both of us, we love Star Wars, but also, there's Indiana Jones.
I know. The man does not have one thing to his name, right?
Doesn't.
He's done
Which we're here
a
to
fair
talk
amount.
About
Star Wars.
The one thing.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about Star Wars, however.
Which is just such a huge... And I think there's also something to be said about a director that pulls in really exciting talent to realize his vision. Because one person can never do it all, especially with a movie. But George Lucas brought on the perfect mix of people to make Star Wars the behemoth of a entity that it is now in modern culture, right?
Absolutely.
If someone else had done Star Wars, let's say he handed off director duties to someone else, maybe someone who didn't take it as seriously, because apparently on the production of this, you had a lot of crew members on their London sets that just thought the whole thing was kind of a joke, right?
Yeah.
They had not really seen anything like this. They thought it was wonky. Even Harrison Ford was like, I don't know about this dialogue.
I've talked to people and
but he stayed committed.
Yeah. And it's created something so wildly huge. I've talked to people in London that are working on Battlefront 2.
Yeah.
That were working on Battlefront 2.
R.I.P. Battlefront. Still alive. Great game.
Still alive.
Still a great game.
Love it.
Shout out to the Star Wars community for keeping Battlefront 2 alive.
Yep.
An amazing game.
It's something that went from 1977, 1975 probably when they first started.
Yeah. I think he started writing in 73, 74.
Until now.
Oh, I mean, we're talking,
what
is it, 5 decades? 5 decades?
Incredible.
Literally unbelievable. There's not many franchises that have stood that kind of test of time.
Absolutely.
A lot of comic stuff, of course, because I think the breed of comics writers and George Lucas kind of fall into similar categories, right? You could go back and look at comics dialogue and stuff, and it's probably not great from that era, but what they were doing was character building and world building to the nth degree, which is why all those stories still totally work.
Absolutely.
And so does Star Wars, because man, it is just it's good and evil. It's basic, but it's pure and incredibly executed, and just the vision is huge.
Yep.
Yeah. Love it. We're here to fan over Star Wars. That's what this podcast is all about.
Low sodium Star Wars.
Low sodium Star Wars. I love it. That's our tagline. All right. Okay, excellent. Well, hey, I think are we ready to sign off on episode 1 of
I think we are.
The Holonet,
yeah.
our Star Wars podcast by 2 Star Wars nerds. cresting 30 years old, ready to talk about all their Star Wars love.
Yep,
all
absolutely.
right, man. Well, hey,
well,
it's been a treat.
Yep.
Until next time,
Star Wars
fans. I'm
the
Ben,
sound designer,
animator, Matt and Ben.
and here we are.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. See you next time.
See you next time. I know, right?